we're here on behalf of the Secure America Now organization. When you can go to the website, secureamericanow.org, which you'll see. This is in the same spirit of my friend Richard Dreyfuss, who I'm so happy to see here. Will be stoned by a lot of people for being here. But the idea of this group is a grassroots effort to develop, in fact, to make the narrative of securing America, put it into our political discourse, because there is no narrative about foreign policy, the events, the things that are happening. The issue of security for America cannot be just left to the experts. This is something that unites all Americans. And this is a nonpartisan effort because, after all, when 9/11, just to say this, 9/11, there was a moment, the benefit, if they can call it that, 9/11 was that there were no Democrats and Republicans or liberal conservatives in that moment. There were Americans. And a lot of these issues, if we cannot come together and have a platform to both inform ourselves and to have a say, to move the leaders, it doesn't matter if Iran gets a nuclear weapon or uses it or gives it away. It affects everyone. If al-Qaeda, the news last week, is much closer to having nuclear dirty weapons and chemical weapons than anyone thought, if these things happen, they affect America. But in any event, I'm going to turn over to John. He's going to run through some numbers, and I'm going to talk about a couple numbers, and then we have a vacuum in the discourse. There is no narrative about security and foreign policy in our politics. We're so domestically oriented. We're so much in the agendas of the politicians of both parties, as opposed to a discussion between ourselves as Americans. The issue of the mosque is a perfect example. I could take 50 different polls. When the first time I saw it, I was stunned. This is a CNN poll from early August, and I take it because it is probably, it's certainly not a conservative group or poll. This is the question about support or opposition. As you can see, 29% were in favor, 68% against. What is interesting to me is I know no other issue with these kinds of numbers in our political discourse where not only 82% of the Republicans and 70% of the independents, but a majority of Democrats, a majority of non-whites by a huge margin. And most importantly, and this is something we don't know enough about, the issue about the concern about security, particularly about radical Islam and the threat in general, is among women rather than men. It is counterintuitive. Most of the time we think of, and we saw taking military action, women tend to be, if you will, to generalize, women tend to be much more conflict resolution oriented, much more let's sit down and talk, let's be nice. On these issues, women outpace men on everything having to do this by large margins in almost every poll. And I've never seen anything like it, and we don't know why, but it's clearly something has to do, I suspect, which is it has to do with security, fear about their children, but it is a major important component. And I'm going to pick up on that in 1 second. Let me just go quickly to the next two. This is from the Washington Post poll. This is what is also happening. This has been tested every year compared to before 9/11. Do you think the country today is safe from terrorism or less safe? You can see by September, basically we've been running about in the 60 percentile, better than 2 to 1 slightly, that the country was safer than less safe. Look at the margin difference, almost a 40-point swing between September of 2008 and September of 2010. The sense of anxiety that we're becoming less safe is at work here, but it's not part of the political discourse or the answer of how we deal with it. This is from the Pew study that found 41% of them say the public says the United States plays a less important role in the world. It's the lowest number they've ever registered. And a reversal opinion from the beginning of 2009, 44%, almost half the country said China had now become the leading economic power rather than the United States.
How many people here from North Carolina? That's good, good. I was doing polling for a woman named Renee Elmers in North Carolina. And she beat an incumbent down there, Etheridge, but her first TV ad was about the Ground Zero Mosque. And it talked about how she was opposed to it, and people saying, that doesn't matter in North Carolina. Well, people around the country supported her, and it helped her set off and win that race. But there she was in North Carolina, in a rural area, where they were affected by that issue. The Ground Zero mosque issue was the first signal that Americans are insecure. And Pat, your point about the plurality of voters that went along with the president, that plurality that was with them was because they had succeeded. But in the meantime, the rest of the country and the rest of the voters are very concerned that they may not succeed.
Yes, and let me just say this about the mosque issue, because it's very important. This issue keeps coming up. You know, I'm amazed. There is among the elites a view that somehow a discussion about the differentiation between radical Muslim extremism and is somehow an attack is Islamic phobia going on. And it's unbelievable. To me, it's amazing. The American people, you go through their attitudes. We've had no pogroms really in this country against Muslims or Islam. It is about people can differentiate. They can walk and chew gum at the same time. They can see what is dangerous and what is not. And the fact of the matter is this inability to have a discussion. The problem and what showed the results in New York City, in New York State, most liberal place in America, I suppose, other than where I used to live in Beverly Hills, is, I suppose, the opposition to it was overwhelming. Despite all the political leadership and all the elites saying, oh, no, you must do this, we're doing this. Look, the argument was a matter of common sense to people. And this notion that you keep telling people they're bigots and racists when they want to raise them is very dangerous in this society because it does allow the voices that are less rational. But the issue disappeared partly, by the way, because there are a number of Republicans who argue, oh, we shouldn't talk about this issue, we shouldn't deal with this. I just don't get it. We need to have a rational discussion, and we can do it in a unified fashion. But there is a difference, and you cannot say these blanket things. I mean, the elite is the greatest difference in this country right now is the politics between the political class, which is so estranged and might as well be in a separate planet from the mainstream of this country. And when I say the political class, I mean Democrats and Republicans both. And on no issue is this more so than on the question of securing this country and being able to deal with that. And we need to understand that difference. It is time to stop serving the politicians and their agendas and start serving the American agenda.
It seems that there is a change of pace right now from the Obama administration. In the midst of the meltdown in Egypt and the threat from Iran disappearing from the headlines, this week Janet Napolitano came before Congress and testified that the greatest threat we face is from within, from homegrown terrorism. And she went from not using the word terrorism at all last year in front of Congress to this year using it, I believe, 60-something times.
64 times.
Right. So do you see the narrative changing from a media standpoint, reflecting the administration's public shifting on this issue?
It's unclear to me what the administration's position on these things are. Clearly the terrorism thing there is because the evidence is there. As I said a week ago, I mean, this country should have been engaged in a debate about the fact that we discovered that, and it's from WikiLeaks, by the way. I mean, there's some important things that came out of this, that Al-Qaeda is much closer to a dirty bomb and to chemical weapons than anybody thought. This is our own intelligence analysis that we didn't know. And that we had a missing cell running loose in 9/11 we still don't know about, that we didn't even have in the commission report. These subjects, this thing is concerned about internal terrorism is very great. We see what's happening in Europe. In David Cameron's speech following the German leader, the prime minister's speech, look, they have a problem in Europe that we don't have yet. But it is a question here of, well, the one thing we've been able to do in this country is rather than the idea of every ship on its own bottom is having a national identity. You can all be different, we can all be what we are. I'm Irish American, Southerner, talking about messed up. And a lot of people are in terms of mixtures, but, and Catholic to boot, as a Southerner. But I'm saying this thing of group over the whole, e pluribus unum, and this is what's missing for people. And this issue for us is going to be very important. This notion of political correctness in the face of the idea of a national identity. That's who we are, because the only thing in the whole, this, my friend Richard Dreyfuss is doing this amazing thing about civics, the idea that we should have a civic engaged public. Without regard to party or ideology, that you can't have a democracy without it. And this is an example of it. And we have to have this question of putting, again, it's very much what I call the ideology of America, common sense. And the common sense thing is there's more that unites us than divides us. But we can't be told we can't talk about it because it will offend some minor number of people. I mean, we've got this ass backwards, if you pardon my expression. If you don't have a rational discussion, I guarantee you, what you're talking about, Joel, soon with all this anxiety, we're going to see an irrational discussion, and we will all pay a price for that. The sense that if we don't have this discussion, it is going to be let out of control. I believe that it is, in fact, in terms of a narrative, if we have a vacuum now, which is dangerous. If we have a positive narrative, it will turn out to be a huge issue. It could be a very decisive issue in this election. This notion, there is among the elite the notion of you people go away. We will deal with this in our own way that we want to about foreign policy, because you're too stupid and ignorant to understand. What the Secure America Now is doing is providing a platform for the American people to interject themselves. It is your interest, it is the interest of your children and the security of this country that will be decided. And without that voice, I don't want the elite making these decisions on their own basis. So,
Thank you very much, everyone.